Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our third and final session. I would just like that we give an additional 2 to 3 minutes for the other attendees to join, but you are most welcome. We have Tabiso again this evening to just take us through the necessary tips and pointers for our CVs and our interviews. In the meantime, if you have any questions from the previous session, feel free to send your questions through to the chat box, and Tabiso will respond as and when Tabiso will respond as and when questions come through. So thank you for joining us this evening, and I hope that so far we've gained valuable tips and pointers from Tabiso, and we are using those tips and sharing those tips with our fellow colleagues and friends.
Thank you, Naledi. We'll give attendees just a few minutes to join, and then we can start. I think by 10 past, let's just kick off now.
All right, thank you, CEO.
Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Good evening, everyone. Once again, thank you for joining our third and final session with Tabiso, wherein he is here to give us tips and guides on how to prepare for interviews and also how to set up our CV in such a way that we are the candidates that are picked. So once again, Tabiso, thank you so much for taking the time to come and share your knowledge and your expertise with us. We really do appreciate it. Just a little bit of housekeeping rules. You are free to send all your questions through to the chat box. The people will be directing Tabiso to their questions. We prefer that everybody just use the chat box function, and we'll go through each and every question. If you have any questions from the previous session as well, feel free to ask those questions. From my side, thank you and welcome to our third and final installment of this workshop. Tabiso, you feel free to take it away.
Thank you so much, Naledi, for the introduction and for facilitating the third and last session of our interview and CV writing series. So in today's discussion, and maybe let me share my screen for ease of reference. So in today's discussion, I'll simply be taking you through some of the tips that you'll need for an interview, or tips that you'll be using as and when you get an interview. So you would have seen how this has gone in terms of, we started with the CV, you had your CV, you have drafted the CV, and after the CV, they've called you to the job, or maybe you even had a cover letter to the CV, they've called you to the job, and then it gets to a point whereby you go for an interview and then you are interviewed for the role. This is the session that will be taking you through that, and it will also be referring to some of the tips that have been given in the previous two sessions, and obviously a lot of what has been said relating mostly to your skills, your competencies, how to speak about your competencies, both on documents and verbally. So without wasting any further time, I would like to also clarify that if you have any questions, please simply raise your hand. And if I see the hands, I will attend to the questions. And if I'm unable to see your hand, the team will gladly assist me with identifying the questions, and I'll answer those questions. Thank you. Okay, let's get right into it. So like I said, for this session, you have to start by remembering the first tip that I've given in my first session, whereby I was mentioning some of the skills that you will need to succeed in the job search. So starting with your communication skills, your attention to detail, your use of some of the technology platforms that are there, maybe even your Microsoft Office, your Microsoft Word, the ability to work with people, collaborativeness, and quite a lot more of those common skills that are required in every job. So these also work a lot in your interview stage, both as skills that you'll be demonstrating for the interview or as skills that you'll be using for the interview itself. So why interviews matter and what employers evaluate during this interview. So the interviews normally evaluate what kind of a person you are, what capabilities you have, whether you are compatible to the job that they are hiring for, and whether you have potential to succeed within the particular job they are hiring for. And in most cases, these companies will want somebody, and I remember mentioning that it has to be about the company than it is about you, especially if it's a professional role and not an entry-level trainee role or an internship. So if it's going to be a professional role, you're applying to be maybe a candidate attorney, you have to show them that you are capable of doing your duties as a candidate attorney. You are capable of facilitating consultations. You are capable of engaging with clients in a respectful manner. You have to show them that you are compatible with the company that they have. And how would you show that? Is simply by showing what you have in terms of your capabilities and what they have as a company. So do they have some level of similarity, and can you work well with what they have within the organization? And then for potential, obviously, they'll also look at some of the qualifications you bring into the company together with any skills or rare skills that they may be looking for. And obviously, with the job market being a bit saturated, you would imagine that a lot of candidates would have the same CVs, the same qualifications, the same approach to interviews, or even the same experience background. So it is important to ensure that the impression you bring into the first interview is good and lets you into the second. I've seen quite a number of companies recently have been conducting interviews in a way that they would structure them with a first interview with the HR team, the recruiter, a second interview maybe with your line manager, the one you'll be reporting to when they hire you, and the last interview with the CEO. In my opinion, the approach is not really good. It wastes some of the candidates' approaches, or rather, it wastes some of the candidates' time. But then, if you are to be met with such an approach, I think maybe some of these tips that I'll be giving would help you to understand how to approach each of the interviews that you'll be going through. So, like I said, it is important to show punctuality on your first interview, or with the first impression that you'll be bringing to the team. So when you walk into that office, maybe if it's going to be held online, you have to also be you have to be on time, whether it's online or in person. You have to ensure that you have some level of appearance that will be good for the company. If it's going to be maybe done online, you still need to wear your formal attire. If it's done in the company, the same thing should apply. Wear the same clothes you would wear to go to the same company for work. So if it's a company that you have seen to be more about formal attires like your law firm, you have to ensure that you wear your formal attire for the interview, either online or in person. Body language during the interview, either online or in person, is also very important because it shows whether you are nervous or whether you do understand what type of questions they are asking, what type of environments they are operating in. You understand their culture, and that you are actually capable of doing what they are looking for. You have to be articulate, you have to have clarity in the speech that will be given to them. So whenever they ask questions, ensure that they understand what you are going to be saying. and always ensure that when you say stuff, you give them time to ask the next question. So don't take too long explaining some of the terminologies that you'll be speaking on. Simply answer the question, elaborate, close it, thank them after every statement that you give. And I'll give a simple example. Tell us about yourself. My name is Tabiso. You give your qualifications and then you close it by thanking them. Then that shows you have done speaking and you are giving them the platform to proceed with their second question. And obviously, a tip that you have to know for every interview is that it is a conversation more than them interrogating you. So it's not an interrogation. So you have to ensure that the people in that interview, you are comfortable enough to engage with them, and you engage with them in a way that you would engage someone outside an interview setting. But then obviously respect has to come into the picture. So when you are conducting, or if the interview is being conducted and you're in the room, you have to ensure that you you present yourself in a way that doesn't show that you are way too professional or way less professional. You just have to be neutral in a way that if there's something that you wanna bring into the picture that you think maybe might make people laugh during the interview, people tend to overlook such tips. Like, if you make people laugh in an interview, I don't think there's a reason for them to ever forget you. So it doesn't always have to be you simply telling them what you learned during your LLB or during the qualification that you have. Sometimes you just have to be practical about things and tell them what you know about stuff. If maybe the company has shared something on their social media platform recently, which is not negative, obviously. You can't mention negative things during the interview. If they've mentioned something positive, maybe about what their CEO did, you can make a joke about that during the interview just to ease the atmosphere. And at least if a lot of them laugh during the interview, or a lot of them are at ease, including yourself, it makes the engagement easier. You also have to be focused and you have to listen attentively. You have to give them a chance to speak. And then when you speak, you also have to be mindful of everything that you are going to be saying. And then a strategic interview preparation or company research approach. When or before you go for an interview, it is always said that you have to research the company. You can never go to an interview if you haven't researched what type of a company you are going to an interview for. You have to know what their values are, what their goals, their mission, what they stand for. Even if you can get a policy online on Google about what they have in place, their code of conduct, that should be enough. At least when you get there, you have some sort of understanding about the company, the role, how your skills directly address any challenges the company might have, and also you demonstrating an interest in the job itself. So mostly they want somebody who will be showing them solutions rather than somebody who's simply looking for a job. So you can say that you are looking for a job, but then it's mostly you have to show them that you have solutions to issues. And again, I mentioned the issue of social media. If they are very active on social media, it works in your advantage. So if they've posted something on social media about what they've done recently, you can go to that and use that in your advantage. I remember with my interview for the job that I currently work for, it's an IT company, and I had gone, or rather I had just graduated from LLB, so I don't know anything about IT. The only thing I knew at the time about IT was just typing that a computer has 1, 2, 3, how to type. But then in terms of the backends of a computer, I didn't know quite a lot. So I had to conduct research, starting with their pages. They have quite a number of pages on LinkedIn. So I had to go on LinkedIn, look at what they do. I had to understand their services. I had to understand their client base, even though I won't be the person to deal with the clients directly. But then it was that important that I understand what type of services they provide. At least that way I could narrow down my research to actually what could help the company itself. And I remember I even conducted some level of research on the Internet of Things. I didn't know what the Internet of Things was at the time. I did research on what compliance is. At the time, I didn't know what compliance is, but then I didn't have thorough knowledge in terms of what I could say if somebody was to ask what is compliance. I had to go further to their websites and see. Obviously, in most compliance roles, policies come into the picture. Compliance is the one that writes policies in some cases. So I had to also look at their policies to see what actually do they stand for and what what jurisdictions do they serve. So they have we have offices in many countries. So I also had to look at those countries. So your research goes way longer than just the name of the company and who's the director. You have to understand quite a lot of things about it. And then when you get to the interview, it makes it easy for you to actually explain what skills you are bringing into the picture, what difference are they going to make for the company, and what you can gain from them training you. So sometimes it's also very important for graduate roles to mention the benefit that you get from them training you. But then for roles that require a professional, it's mostly you have to tell them what you've seen, any gaps that you might have seen in terms of their company profiles, the way they they present themselves online, and then you can narrow that down to solutions in most cases. You have to analyze the role you are going to be interviewed for. And how do you analyze it? You simply go to the job description. It's always advantageous if you have a job description. And you would remember I've been speaking about job description from the first session that you have to have the job description to do your CV. And after that, you'll still need that same job description for the interview. And you'll still need that same job description for any other post-interview engagements that you'll have with the company. So you have to study the job description, understand what they are looking for versus what you have. It goes back again to the question of compatibility. What they are looking for versus what you have, is it something that you think you can do? My advice, never lie on your CV. I remember recently I had one candidate who hasn't worked for quite some time, one client rather, who hasn't worked for quite some time. She's been looking for a job for some time, and she asked that I alter her CV in a way that would get her jobs in compliance, even though she didn't have compliance a compliance background. So I had to not necessarily lie on the CV, but then include some of the skills that she did not have. And guess what? That backfired because she got an interview a week later, and it was for a compliance role that required somebody with 10 years experience. You can imagine the type of questions that they were going to ask her. And obviously the interview didn't go well because for somebody with 10 years experience in compliance, you're going to be asked about quite a lot of scenario type questions or solutions that you brought over the 10 years that you've been serving in compliance. So it's always important to narrow things down to what you can actually do. Can you do what they said on the job description? You've mentioned that you can on your CV, and then please go to the interview and elaborate further why you say you can. So again, just comparing this with CV. So sometimes you find out you're trying to narrow your CV down to maybe a page. This is where you're going to extend to your CV to say, and it's important to also add that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that I didn't include in the CV. And I think this would help a lot to the company. I have talent in 1, 2, 3, 4. So the interview gives you that comfort to add on to what you couldn't add on either the CV or the cover letter. And then I spoke about some level of self-assessment, understanding yourself, and it goes back again to the SWOT analysis. You understand what you can do. You understand the strengths you have versus the weaknesses you have. And again, if you are asked for this question, what your strengths are versus what your weaknesses are, you have to start with your weaknesses in most cases. You speak about the weakness that you have, you specify what you're doing to cure that weakness. So if it's an issue of communication, maybe you've joined some mentorship program where they teach you how to speak. Or if, again, it's still the issue of communication, but then you've joined a public speaking initiative that teaches you how to speak in public and it's going well, or you are still learning. If maybe it's a failure to create connections, it's important to create connections in most job environments. So if you are not able to create meaningful connections within job settings, you have to mention that you are not able to start and maintain relationships, but then you are doing something to work on it. What is it? You mention something practical and show that you are actively working on that weakness to make it a strength. And then you go to your strengths, and then you speak about all the good things you've done. And for everything or for every answer you're going to be giving in the interview, you have to substantiate the same way you've been substantiating on your CV as to where you got your skills, where you got your qualifications. You have to substantiate again in the interview. So knowing yourself plays quite a good role in that. And then practicing the interview before it takes place is also very important. So having some level of mock interviews, maybe with a friend that you trust, you can simply have a few friends over, ask them to ask you common interview questions, and then you try answer those questions to them. And then if you feel like there's areas that need improvements, you can work around those. And if you are alone, you can simply use a mirror works in most cases. You just use your mirror, you go to the mirror, you speak about some of the common interview questions, and then obviously it will be narrowed down to the job you have applied for. So you'll look at some of the common interview questions for that specific job. If it's a candidate attorney role, for example, you'd be speaking about how you would handle a consultation based and how you'd have some level of care for clients. And then you'll see how you respond to that during the mock interview, and then versus what you're going to do in the interview. I think preparation works magic or works best for interviews. Going there blindfolded always doesn't end well, because every question looks like they are attacking you, or maybe you're caught off guard. So answering most interview questions with confidence. So answering interview questions with confidence goes back to the issue of you being comfortable in the interview room. I mentioned on the first slide that you have to create some level of relationship with the people that are going to be interviewing you, at least to make things easy, both for yourself, for them, and the panel as a whole. So if maybe, be it you are somebody who's good at positive jokes, you can use that to your advantage for the interview. If you are somebody who has done something that is well known within that particular industry, it is important to also maybe mention that during the interview or before the interview to the team. At least there's something they always mention within corporate. They call it a brag list. So it's simply a list whereby you mention your achievements, and then you brag to your manager or to your executives that, hi guys, look, I've got a new qualification. I've just got a distinction in one module. I'm currently enrolled for 1, 2, 3. So you can use the same approach of a break list during that interview. So if there's something that wasn't included in your CV, you simply mention that. And then again, it is always also important to refer them to some of the things you've done. If you have some level of footprint online, maybe you are quite active on LinkedIn, you can also keep on giving references to your profile, showing them that you are good and confident about the subject that you are engaging on. And then the common interview questions. Normally, you'd be asked, tell me about yourself. So for common interview questions, I'm going to separate this into the three interview stages that I mentioned. So you'll have your interview with a recruiter, and then there's that one you'll have with a line manager, and then the one with the executive. So common interview questions for an interview with a recruiter would be things like tell me about yourself. What are your strengths and your weaknesses? Why do you want to work here? What difference do you bring to the company? And things like that. So for your tell me about yourself question, it's always best to structure it in a way that you use the same method I mentioned for the professional summary. So it'll be who you are, the number of years of experience you have relevant to the job description. So if they say they want somebody with 10 years experience as an admitted attorney, you start with exactly that. My name is Tabitha Farah. I have over 10 years of experience as an admitted attorney, or I have 20 years experience as an admitted attorney. I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You mentioned your technical skills. So technical skills will be the things you've learned on the job. You'll mention your soft skills, things you've already known, things you grow with. So soft skills will be your communication. It's always the first one. Your interpersonal skills, you work well with people. Your ability to interrogate situations, that one also is a skill that in most cases you grow with. And then at least when you have that, you are able to structure it well. So it will be who you are, the experience, and then you mention the skills. You mention why you applied for the job briefly and what difference you can bring to the company briefly again, still on the what, or tell us about yourself. And then if they ask you why you want to work for the organization, never tell them that it's because you just want to have a job, but then show them this is where the research part comes into the picture. So you've researched the company, you've seen that there's quite a few areas that need improvement, but then even if areas don't need improvement, but you see that you can bring a difference to the already succeeding team, you mention that. And then you show them that you did your research, you understand the organization, you understand the culture, the business they are in, their clients. Every organization cares mostly about their clients, irrespective of the type of job you are going to be doing for them. So always here and there mention how you can bring some level of difference to their clients. The second leg of that would be interview with your line manager. So if it's going to be your line manager, this person will be trying to find out the type of person he will be working with on a daily basis. So the likes of tell me about yourself will most likely not be asked unless he feels he hasn't gotten enough information from HR about you. So on this one, you'll get those questions such as tell me about the time when you had a situation and you had to resolve the situation, and then maybe they might give a scenario that is relevant to the job that you have applied for. So for this one, you simply show him. In most cases, you have to show a few pillars on the job. So it will be you show them how you have some level of problem solving. So tell me about the time when you had a problem and you have to resolve it. in a particular manner. You'll show them that you understand the problem itself. You'll show them how you normally deal with problems, and then you show them again what you do after problems have been resolved. And I'll give you an example with conflict resolution. It comes a lot in this question of tell us about a time. So tell us about a time when you had to resolve a conflict between colleagues. So you'll mention how you were you'll mention how you were fair in your decision and you didn't let any emotions come into the picture, how you looked at company policies versus what is right to do. And then you also mention how maybe what they did, you advise them to be reported if it's things that need to be reported. And then you also mention how you did follow-ups to show that you wanted the case to be resolved. And if it's not something that ended up being a case, you just mention how you just gave simple advice whereby you didn't show any favoritism towards either of the parties. You answering in that manner shows them that you are somebody who understands human dynamics. You are somebody who is impartial in nature. You give people a chance to provide their side of their stories, and impartiality works a lot or is an important skill in any job related role. So you have to be impartial in most cases. So the line manager will be testing those rare skills that will be setting you apart from everyone else. And in answering such, you have to give real life situations. So it's always important to give a real life situation where you were involved, how you dealt with it, and what the outcome was. So outcome is also important in that regard. And then the last one will be an interview with your CEOs or your COOs, anyone in executive level. So if you're going to be having an interview with a CFO, you have to ensure that you speak mostly money. Money questions are always important for interviews with business owners. They want to know that this person will bring some level of sustainability to my business. This person will bring maybe value in terms of money. And I know some roles do not bring any value, like mine. My role doesn't bring value, but then it protects the company from ever losing money for anything legal related, any risk. So normally if you fail in terms of risks, you have to pay fines and they sometimes get to millions. So me being here, I protect them from losing millions, even though I don't generate any money. So when you meet anyone in executive level, it's important to uh, specifically show that. So if you're going to be going for a role whereby you're going to be in sales, you'll show them how you've grown sales in the past and what you can do for them to grow sales. If it's a role like mine whereby you don't generate any sales for them, show them how you're going to be saving them money. And then if it's a role whereby it will be neutral, you are either generating sales or not generating, show them the difference you can bring that goes again to sales or money. And then I don't think there's any reason for them to not call you after having an interview like that.
Do we,
And yeah,
sorry to interject, I just wanted to check if we have any questions or commentary before we proceed further from the floor. Okay, I take it we don't have any questions. You may proceed, Tabisa. Thank you.
thanks, Naledi. So again, a lot of these questions that I'm referring to also assess your behavior, uh, how you would engage in situations that require you to think on your feet, situations that have quite high problems that need to be resolved on the spot, high pressure situations whereby in most cases we say I can work under pressure, but then when you get to the interview, you mentioning that on your CV, they might pose a particular question that will assess whether you were lying on your CV, saying you can work under pressure. They might ask you a simple question about a situation where maybe something goes bad in the company. What would you do? And in your answer, you would not be strategic, maybe, and say you would leave it as is, or give it to another person, or leave it to the executives. But then in some cases, you have to make the decision, even though executives are not around. So sometimes behavioral questions also come into the picture, but then they won't tell you it's a behavioral question. So it's also important to look out for those. And then effective preparation, you have to always prepare. Like I said, the issue of mock interviews. So you can do them on your own, do them with friends. And as you go for interviews, always try to get some level of feedback for yourself. Sit down to see where you can improve, what went wrong, what are some of the areas that need to be researched more. And obviously, interviews, you'd be going to interviews of companies that probably have similar values. As time goes, it won't be about you having to research everything, but then just you researching the company itself and everything you'll be knowing as you go. So it's always important to have that level of preparation and reflection. During the interview, it's important to actively listen. So like I said, it being a conversation doesn't mean you have to just answer their questions and leave it at that. Actively listen, understand what they are asking, understand what they are giving. You know, sometimes you go to an interview and you get lucky. Instead of them interviewing you, they simply introduce their company and hire you on the spot. So you have to have that level of listening. And then in that space, they'll be telling you about maybe what they don't like, what you should expect. It's important to know that at least when you start, it becomes easy to understand the environment you'll be in. And not only for that, but also for the questions they'll be asking. Understand the questions they're asking before you answer. If a question wasn't understood, it's easy and allowed to simply ask them to rephrase a question or ask it again. And then pausing before answering is also very good from a communication perspective, just to give yourself that level of time to think about the answers you're going to give, to think about the approach that you'll be taking for those answers, and also maybe some of the situations that you might have had in the past. So sometimes you might have forgotten something, but then if you give yourself that little bit of pause, you might remember it, and it will help your interview in a good way. And then there is a method that is normally used for interviews that people call the STAR method. It's a structure whereby you use to prepare for the interview to have impactful answers, how you're going to approach them, what answers you're going to give for each of the questions, and how you're going to give those answers. So to start with, on the STAR element being a situation, like I said, it's always important to contextualize things. Mention a situation whereby there was an issue, a task, what was your responsibility during that situation, action, what steps you took personally, but personally yourself, what you did. So some people will make that mistake of saying there was maybe a breach at our company and IT did their things, or our managers did their things. You are giving them the spotlight and not yourself. So I'm not saying you should steal anyone's spotlight, but then mention only what you did yourself. So if there was something whereby you did with other people, mention you and others. So my team and I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the action you did. And then in those actions, you also mentioned the skills and the decisions that were made either by yourself or the people you were with. And again, the questions, you have to be strategic when you answer them. each and every time you mention something, add a little bit of skills that appear on the job description in what you say. So if it's an action that you took, they want somebody who's a leader. You mention an action that will end up showing how you were a leader for a team of 5 people that did something that changed something for the company. And then you come to your result, you elaborate the result in the best concise manner as you can, and then the impact, and then what happened after. In some cases, you can even take it back to the breaking part to say, after making the difference, your team was all, everyone in your team was promoted, or maybe certificates were given. Now you're explaining the certificate you mentioned on your CV that you were promoted, or maybe you were simply awarded the certificate of Best Employee of the Month. This is where you also add so the substantiation of it. So you go back and forth in terms of your CV, what you did, you refer them to your CV sometimes, what you did again, and then you go forth with that. And then your appearance, the body language you'll be using, and follow up after interviews. So I mentioned how important it is to also, or rather, always appear in the most professional manner possible. Sometimes they say it's better to overstyle yourself professionally than to understyle. So you can just rock up into the interview dressed in your running attire. Sometimes it might actually jeopardize your chances of getting the role. But then at least if you've had your simple formal attire, it makes things easy. It also presents some level of respect between yourself and for the company itself and the people who will be interviewing you. And then again, something worth understanding, the company's culture. Most companies have culture. Some have culture, but they don't know it. So if you simply understand what type of culture they have and try to take it a bit towards that. Like imagine a situation whereby you're going into a company that has their branding colors as red and blue, and you are wearing red and blue, but in the most formal and presentable manner possible. When you enter the first thing they have is them looking at your outfit, and they'll just have that first impression. If it's people who have a like for their branding, they'll have a first impression in terms of how you appeared, the detail that the level of detail that you have towards what they do and what they have, and also maybe even the culture from a people perspective. If they have a culture that is socially active, also showing some level of support and awareness in terms of what that culture does, goes a long way. And then confident body language is important. You are free to do anything which is reasonable during the interview. And if you feel like there is a particular trait about yourself that you think it needs to be known, it's important that you maybe bring it forth and then let them take it or not take it and continue with what they can take. And why do I say a particular trait? So there's people who prefer maybe presenting themselves standing. There's people who like to present themselves seated. There's people who like to present themselves by speaking with hands. And you know, in the black culture, in most cases, some people think people who speak with hands are pointing fingers. It's disrespectful. It's disrespectful and all that. But it's important to just put it on the table to say these are some of the things, or some sort of a disclaimer. These are some of the things to expect. This is the type of person I am. You are transparent about who you are and what you do and how you present yourself. At least none of what you're going to do from the interview up until it ends comes as a surprise for either of them. Body language is important. You have to maintain some level of eye contact with the people in the interview. And if you are seated, sit uptight, do not move around. If you are standing, stand in one position. But then if you are somebody who can sit in one position, again, back to my earlier tip, just make a disclaimer about that. And then handshakes are important. When you enter the interview, just shake the hands of everyone in the interview. And if you know anyone in the interview, it is advisable to not only go to them or mention them by name. So simply pretend like you know the names from the list that has been given to you. So sometimes when they qualify an interview, they'll give you a list to say, Taviso will be interviewing you, Peter will be present, maybe another person again. You have to simply maybe address them by their surname, Mr. What, Mrs. What, or if they are comfortable using names, you go with their names, but never show that you know any of the people in the interview. Even if you didn't get the interview through nepotism, by simply showing that you know someone in the interview, it might ruin your chances of getting the job. And then the handshakes again, it's important. If you are in a room and they come in, find you in the room, they greet you, stand up and proceed with the handshakes. It shows some level of respect and etiquette. And smile a lot during the interview. Not too much, just here and there. When you speak about some things, you can smile, you can laugh, but then have some level of professionalism in doing all that. And then effective communication. I've mentioned communication from the beginning of the presentation. Communication is very important for every interview because you'll be engaging, you'll be speaking with people throughout and until outside the interview. And communication not only speaks to you, speaking to them verbally, but also the communication you'll be sending in terms of your follow-ups and everything else. If you're going to be doing a visual interview, I mentioned visual interviews at the beginning. You have to ensure that there's good lighting, they can clearly see you. You are dressed up as you would dress to a in-person interview. You have to have a neutral background. Don't be in a place whereby there's cows running around in the background or there's people drinking alcohol in the background. It might ruin your chance. Maybe a white background, you are done. Or if you don't have a good background, you simply use some of these platforms allow for people to add backgrounds lately. So you simply add a background, a white background green screen, and then you have to ensure that you have stable internet. Some people are apologetic in interviews in a way that if maybe your internet is bad, they might schedule another one. But then in some cases, unfortunately, if they can't get you, they can't get you, and then they close it. I remember there was one candidate that we interviewed. So in our company, if we're going to look for somebody in compliance, the compliance team has to be the one to interview. If they are going to look for someone in sales team has to interview. So at the time they were looking for someone in compliance, we had to interview the person. And her connectivity or internet was so bad, but then we decided to reschedule the meeting to a later date because we actually wanted to give her the opportunity. But then if it's other companies or if it's most companies, them trying to save time, they'll just leave you and then go to the next candidate. You can imagine the level of loss that will be having lost an opportunity to internet connectivity and loss of access to internet, maybe. And then after the interview has been conducted, you've done your interview, you've engaged with everyone in the interview. After the interview, you have to have some takeaways that you'll take or some things that you'll take from the interview that you had. A polite follow-up. You have to reflect and learn. And then you have to send a professional thank you email within 24 hours. And this is very important. After the interview, when you get home, you simply say, "Hi, Taviso. Thank you so much for interviewing me today. And then you mention if there's something you fail to say during the interview, simply mention it briefly. Don't make it a long email. Just briefly, just to add to what I said, I forgot to mention that I have a qualification in 1, 2, 3, and then you close it. You thank them again. If they don't get back to you, you have to set a polite follow-up. And follow-ups have to be as brief as possible. Simply, hi, I'm following up on the recent interview we had, and then you close it. And then you are going to go for some level of self-reflection and learning. You look at some of the performance issues that you may have had during the interview. You identify areas that need to be improved, and that will help you in preparing for the next interview. And then you'll also have to have some key takeaways from each and every interview that you go to. So again, always prepare thoroughly for each, communicate clearly, listen attentively before you answer every question. You have to demonstrate value, either value in money or value in solutions that you can bring to problems. And then the following up will always come in. Following up starts with you sending the first email where you send your CV. After sending a CV, they don't get back to you. You follow up. They get back to you. They call you for an interview. After interview, you follow up. They promise you an offer. They don't get back to you. You follow up again up until you get a job. I don't remember how many times I followed up until I got the job I'm currently in. But I think they had forgotten about me for some time, but then I had to follow up and I got the call back. So it's important to always follow up. And following up many times doesn't mean you are nagging them or anything, but it simply shows that you are serious about the job. And sometimes you find that maybe HR has quite a lot on their plate. Sometimes they might be dealing with payrolls, they are sending salaries, and they had an interview with you yesterday. They already forgotten about that. You sending that follow-up email at least will jog their memory to say, okay, remember there's this on the to-do list. Please call Tabiso for the maybe second interview, or send the offer to him if he has passed the interview. Yeah, that is all on the interview preparation
Thank you so
skills.
much,
I don't know if
Tabiso.
we have
We do have a
any.
question
Let
in
me
the
stop
chat box.
sharing that. Yeah, you can
Yes,
share the question.
the question's from Rory Sang. She says, "Good evening, Tabiso and the fellow mentees. Thank you for the session. How detailed should each star component be in an interview answer without making the response too long?" And we also have a compliment from Mokami. It says the star method is actually a trick I have never thought of. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. So the best way to approach the STAR method without taking up too long, I know sometimes you can try to articulate yourself and elaborate, and you end up taking so much time. But then I think the best way to do this is to acknowledge the question that they have given you. So you start by, if they say this is a situation, they normally ask a long question for questions whereby you use the STAR method. So they say, this is a situation, and what would you do? So you simply start by acknowledging that you understand the situation they've given you. So, okay, you said there's an employee who harasses other employees, and my job will be ensuring that employees do not harass other employees. What I would do is engage that employee, try to find out, investigate, and then escalate if I cannot resolve this myself. See how you've structured something that requires so much details in two or one line. So you simply acknowledge that you've understood the question, show that you understand the situation in the question, and then give the solution, and then another solution to that if that solution doesn't work. And in most cases, if a solution doesn't work, it gets escalated to someone else. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yes,
answering.
thank you. I think it answers the question. Thank you, Taviso. I think for me, I'll just add that once first and foremost, thank you for all of the sessions. We've learned a lot with the build up of each and every session. And I think I don't know if you mentioned this in the presentation or I missed it, is when you are engaging in interviews, also remembering that it's a conversation. And as a interviewee, you are also allowed to ask questions. And it also shows that you have interest or you are clued up in terms of the company and you've done your research. So that's also one thing people can consider doing at the end if they ask you, do you have any questions, even if it's just one question. I think it also shows that you do have interest with the of the entire organization. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maruna, for mentioning that. I actually forgot to mention this, and it's a very, very, very important aspect of every interview. You should never end an interview without asking a question. That is correct. Even
We
if they say any question, always ensure that you do have one, even if it's a simple question about their culture or something.
we have another question, Tabiso. It's from Onda Dele. It says, "Good evening, Tabiso and my fellow mentees. Can you please describe the form of making connections? Is it just conversing with them only, or there's more to it?"
Making connections can be a bit difficult and easy at the same time, but then it depends on the type of connections you would be making. So sometimes it can be, and the easy side, for example, it can take something as easy as just going to someone. If it's not someone you've met in person, go into their inbox. Hi, Tabiso. This is 1, 2, 3 that I'm doing. This is 1, 2, 3 that I think you can assist with. And then sometimes it goes to maybe just engaging people in person. Somebody once told me that I had a question about executives being intimidating. So I work with executives a lot, but they are intimidating. I said, hey, I can't speak to executives. And the person said, those people are always looking for somebody they can mentor. They're always looking for somebody who will come to their door, who'll ask questions, and you'd be surprised how much they'll give you when you go to their door. Even though they look intimidating, they look scared, they're always quiet on their phones. But then when you go to them, they always give you things in detail. And even the advice always extends to more than what you've asked for. So it goes again back to the issue of creating connections. When you do create connections, people may look intimidating in most cases, but then when you simply engage them, tell them the types of things you want to get out of them, be it you want the person to mentor you, you want the person to answer a particular question, a quick something that they can do for you, a query about something, simply specifying that and being brief in what you say always goes a long way. I don't know if that answers it.
Thank you so much, Tabiso, for your time, and thank you to all the mentees for participating in our sessions. You guys have been with us since the first session right up until the third and final session. So from Tabiso, myself, and Mashobane Advisories, we just like to extend our deepest gratitude for you guys to continuously support us and to see each and every session through. Should you guys want any if you should you guys want to contact Otabi, so feel free to contact us, to contact Busi, and we will definitely share his contact details, as we all know that South Africa is really going through a employment crisis. So sessions like this are very important and useful. I myself have learned a few things I didn't know about the SMART approach, and I also look forward to applying it even at my day-to-day job. So I just like to say to everyone, thank you so much. for being here, and that's it for today. Thank you.